This is the daily Mishna recording for December 28th, for Wednesday, December 28th. If you are watching this in the morning, good morning. Otherwise, I hope you're having a great day. Mishna Hey. We're learning Mishnah Yoma, Parak Vav, chapter 6, Mishnah Hey, Mishnah Vav. Previous Mishnah had discussed that there were huts along the route between Yerushalayim and the cliff. I'll call sukkah v'sukkah at each hut. They would tell him there were people who were manning these huts. And they would say to him, the people in each hut would say to him, Hare Mazan Bare Mayim, we have food and we have drink here. They let him know. They let him know that if you're not going to be able to continue, if you're not going to be able to continue going, doing this trip, there is food and drink available for you. Halachically, if you wouldn't be able to go, if you wouldn't be able to continue without breaking his fast, you'd be allowed to. That's because we say the mitzvah of pushing this animal over the cliff overrides the obligation to fast. At the same time, the Bartanur brings down that it never happened that he needed to break his fast. And in a large degree, the purpose of telling him we have food and drink here, even though he was fasting, was to let him know that if you need, we have food and drink here, which really put him at ease. Put him at ease to know if he needs it, food and drink is there. Bartanur says it never happened that they needed to break their fast. But they told them that it's available if they need, and if they really need it, they could have done it. So that's what it means. I'll call sukkah b'sukkah. By each sukkah, they said to him, Hare mazon v'hare mayim. There's food and there's water. Umalaban oisai misukkah l'sukkah. Now, from one sukkah to another, the people who manned one sukkah would then escort him to the next sukkah. And those that were stationed at the next sukkah would escort him to the next one. Chutz me'achreina. Except when they came to the last sukkah, to the last booth, last hut. Except for the last one of them, that the person who escorted him did not escort him all the way to the cliff. He didn't reach the cliff together with him. But rather he stood from afar, and he watches what he was doing. So we've got the people from each hut escorting him from hut to the next hut. But at the last hut, he didn't escort him all the way to the cliff. But it sounds like he did escort him, he just didn't escort him all the way to the end. So how far did he go? So what the whole setup here was that as we have each one of the, it came out that if the total was 12, so as we said previously, from Yerushalayim to the hut was 1 mil, right? To neck, and we had 10 huts. That means between each hut, there was 1 mil. A mil, we mentioned, is 2,000 cubits. A cubit is about anywhere between 1.5 and 2 feet. And as we mentioned yesterday, and we'll elaborate more on it, 2,000 cubits is a limited amount that a person can walk on Shabbos under certain circumstances. Now, let me read you how this works. On Shabbos Yom Tov, it is forbidden to walk more than 2,000 cubits, amas, from the place where one was residing when the day began. This distance is known as the Tchum Shabbos. Now, we'll just clarify a little bit. So you wherever you have created your residence for Shabbos, you now have 2,000 cubits from that residence. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're living in your house in the middle of a city, that from your house within the city you can only walk 2,000 cubits around your house. It doesn't work that way. It really works that you create a residence for yourself, and really your residence extends for as long as the city extends. But if let's say you're not in a city, let's say you're in a forest, and you're setting up shop in the forest for Shabbos, you're not within any kind of city limits, or in what's considered an extension of the city. You're out there. So then we say, where you establish your place for Shabbos, you're limited to 2,000 cubits in each direction. Now, in this case, we're outside of Yerushalayim. We're going outside of Yerushalayim. When the person starts taking the goat from the Out Yerushalayim to the first hut, they're leaving the limits of Yerushalayim. So So they explain. So it's explained in the notes like this: each of the people waiting in the huts had been there since before Yom Kippur. Therefore, he could walk 1 mil from his hut, which was just enough to reach the next hut. So you've got these people. They're outside of Yerushalayim. They're outside of the Tchum. They're outside the hut itself. The first hut, right, basically was 1 mil. It was already at a distance. The first, put it this way: the first hut was already situated outside of the boundary of Yerushalayim. Was outside the city, and the people in that hut, they had established their residence there before Yom Kippur. This applies both on Shabbos and applies both on Yontif. And those people in those huts, each of the people waiting in the huts had been there since before Yom Kippur. They established their place for Yom Kippur in that hut. Therefore, he could walk 1 mil from his hut, which was just enough to reach the next hut. Right? Yes, in 4 directions, he's got 1 mil. So he can now escort the person to the next hut. He can't go past that, but he can go to the next hut. And actually, in that hut, the person in the first hut could go back to Yerushalayim because he was within 2,000 amos of Yerushalayim too. Okay, so what we have it set up is like this. Therefore, each of the people waiting in the huts had been there since before Yom Kippur. Therefore, he could walk 1 mil from his hut, which was just enough to reach the next hut. Okay, and that was what happened from hut to hut. Each person established their place for Yom Kippur in the hut, and they were able now to escort the person up to the next hut, not further. The person in the last hut, which was located 2 mil from the cliff, was allowed to walk with him only 1/2 of the way. He was only able to walk the distance of 2,000 cubits that he has. More than that, he couldn't. And that's what it means that he didn't go with him up to the cliff because he couldn't go up to the cliff. It was past the Tchum Shabbos, was past the Shabbos Yom Kippur Yontif boundary. But you'll ask, and what about the person taking the goat? He's going to be going past the 2,000 cubits. The person who took the Azazel goat was allowed to travel outside his Tchum, his limit, because the mitzvah of bringing the goat to the cliff overrides the prohibition of going outside one's Tchum. The mitzvah, again, taking the animal to the cliff overrides this prohibition of Tchum Shabbos, of what you're limited to walk on Shabbos. According to most opinions, it's a rabbinic prohibition, and according to some, that it may be that according to those who hold it is a Torah prohibition. It's still, we say that the taking of the animal to the cliff, that mitzvah has the power to override that prohibition of Tchum Shabbos, and therefore the person in the last hut could only take him half the way. As the Mishna said, he didn't reach the cliff. He didn't make it he didn't take him all the way to the cliff, but he stood from afar and watched what he was doing. Now, why couldn't they make another hut? Make an 11th hut. Why could they have to have 10 huts? Make an 11th hut. And then the person in hut 10 can take him to hut 11, and hut 11 can take him to the cliff. So it's explained here again in the notes. They did not build an 11th hut at a distance of 1 mil from the cliff because its resident would be able to reach the cliff on Yom Kippur. And that would not be consistent with the Torah's description of the area as uninhabited land. That's what Torah calls this cliff, uninhabited land. If the person if there would be an 11th hut, then that person it would be within the Tchum Shabbos, that person would be able to make it, in the 11th hut would be able to make it to that area. And therefore wouldn't be considered uninhabited. Therefore, there was no 11th hut. So the person in the 10th hut would take him halfway, as far as he could go for his Tchum Shabbos, his boundary for Shabbos. And the person taking the goat, his mitzvah overrode that prohibition, and therefore could take it all the way to the cliff. Have a wonderful day.